Hey guys, it's Vampire Mike from Sega CD Universe. Wanted to do a quick video talking about D2 on the Dreamcast. So if you guys have watched me for a long time, I had done a video a while ago talking about how I played, and I think I mentioned that I had beaten the first D. D is a series of games made by Kenji Eno, who has sadly passed away since. It's been a few years now. His games were always very interesting. And for the time, they were groundbreaking in some ways. I'm not really sure how well they actually hold up now, though. So, just to kind of line this up, D1 is a first person horror game where it's pretty much all full motion video, but not real people. It's computer graphics. And you go around and solve puzzles, and there's lots of like cheesy ways to die. Not cheesy like goofy, cheesy like one hit kills. Like you'll go into a room and do something like a wall will close in on you and kill you. It's fairly graphic. The story's pretty interesting, pretty dark. It's extremely slow paced and very linear. You have to sort of do things in a certain way, or you're just going to get stuck in a loop. Time's going to run out and you're going to die. The second game in the series was on the Sega Saturn. I have the Japanese version of that. It's called Enemy Zero. The only real big tie-in with all the games is the main protagonist. Her name is Laura. It's definitely her in each game. It looks just like her in each game. Her looks don't change, her attitude doesn't change, but her last name is always different. So for some reason, he's picked this protagonist Laura to use throughout the series, but says it's, I guess, sort of portrays her as being a different person with the same name, the same looks, just a different last name. The second game is you're on a spaceship and you have this device, if I remember correctly, and there's invisible aliens. And the aliens, the closer they get to you, the louder this device beeps. So you want to get away from them, pick up items, solve puzzles. It's pretty hard to play in Japanese. It's interesting. It's got interesting concepts. Kenji Eno was always big on trying to push boundaries. So the first game, D, for its time was gorgeous. When it came out on PS1 and Saturn and 3DO, it was just phenomenal looking. I'm pretty sure I own it on 3DO. Um, Enemy Zero was interesting because now he's playing on your senses, with just sound. You're getting scared by a sound. They never show the bad guys from what I remember. You just hear this beeping getting louder and louder. So it's jarring. He also did a Japanese game, and I'm going to look up real quickly, um, called Kage something. I think it's like Kage blah 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 blah. Wind of something. Give me one moment here, and I'll find it. Real Sound, excuse me, Kaze no Regret, which looks like it came out on Saturn and then got a like remastered type version on the Dreamcast. Real Sound Kaze no Regret, which I think stands for something to do with wind, if I recall correctly. So that game is interesting in that there are no visuals. The Saturn version is, I believe, just a black screen with sounds, and it's a game made for blind people. The sequel has not the sequel, excuse me, the remake on the Dreamcast has visuals, but it's just like a picture of like flowers moving around or something. It's not like actual graphics. So he's always done these strange games to try and, I guess, play off of people's senses. And I would say D2 goes along with that vibe in some sense. So now that I've kind of prefaced all that for 4 minutes and 17 seconds, D2 is a survival horror game again, because they're always kind of horror games. Um, it's third person with tank controls, but they're pretty good. And you play Laura yet again, and you're in a plane that crash lands, and you forget your memory between like a certain amount of days on the crashed plane. You get off the plane, and you're rescued, and you meet these people, and all these other people are now starting to transform into like these monsters. They have these weird, strange plant-like limbs. They have green blood. They start developing almost like a mixture between plants and bugs. and they attack you and you have to shoot them. The gunplay, so there's the running around kind of like Resident Evil. The gunplay goes into first person, but you can't move your character, you can only move the gun. It's extremely loose, and like the gun really wobbles around a lot. You have different guns, you get a handgun. You start the game with an Uzi, and the Uzi has unlimited bullets. Um, you also get later on a shotgun, grenades, and a semi automatic rifle, which also the semi automatic has unlimited bullets. The rest of the guns you have to find bullets for. So you move around, and if you hit certain parts of the monsters, they die quicker or they get hurt and like stumble. It's pretty good. It's extremely loose, like I said. All the while, you're walking pretty much throughout the whole game. You do get a snowmobile at points, which is much faster, and you're also using a hunting rifle to survive by killing birds and rabbits and moose. And you have this portable cooker on you. I don't understand how. The funny part of the game is Laura is wearing like a business suit in the Canadian sub, like sub-degree weather with a skirt on and high heels. She's not dressed appropriately at all. Meanwhile, she's carrying a shotgun, a grenade, a handgun, an Uzi, a semi-automatic, tons of first aid spray that you can find, and this portable cooker that automatically cooks your food as soon as you kill something. And then when you kill something, it says you have got 2 meats or 3 meats. I always thought meat was just plural. Maybe I'm wrong. It just comes off as very funny with weird translation, so that was kind of amusing. So there's lots of goofiness that I think was unintentional. The um, the voiceover work is a little goofy, not as bad as Resident Evil, but silly. Some of the lines are silly, and the story is was probably at one point this like amazing thing, but I'm assuming because it got translated to English, it's very disjointed in ways, and everything is very slow. So you have a mixture of running around like Resident Evil, shooting monsters first person, but it's very loose. Tank controls, driving around in a snowmobile in the snow, and going from point A to point B to point C to point D, and you have to do things in a certain order and unlock and progress story elements to then continue the game. You can't just run around and do what you want when you want. It's very linear. Um, the game's creepy a little bit. The sound was really good. Uh, I give a big shout out to my buddy Chris over at Implant Games, who I thought it was more recent, but 4 years ago now, I think it was, had reviewed D2 and did a great job. So check out his review if you want like an in-depth version with visuals and some gameplay shown off. I'll put his link down in the description. He's a good friend and a great reviewer on YouTube. So anyhow, that's the gist of the game. You're trying to figure out why the people are changing. Some people talk about how they were raped. Some people talk about abuse and drug addiction. Some of the characters in the game are taking drugs. There's some weird connection between the drugs and the people changing into these monsters. Um, there's some spiritual stuff going on with a character that's like talking to you and can sort of like transport you different places. It's really weird and it's extremely hard to explain. The best way I guess I could explain it is it has something to do with, and this is what I gleaned from it, which is probably wrong because I'm not the smartest guy in the room, something to do with the earth dying, people changing from doing these drugs, and then you time traveling at one point to fix things. Oh, and Laura, your main character, in all of the games, one, two, and this one, never speaks. She says one word at the end of the game. That's it. She never speaks. She just motions and goes, and makes faces, and you can tell what she's getting at if she's scared or if she's interested, but she never speaks throughout the whole game. People talk to her and have conversations with her, and she just doesn't answer them. Um, it sort of has that quirky weirdness like Shenmue, but not nearly as good. Shenmue's a better game. Um, Shenmue was more fun and more interesting, did things better. This is loose and clunky. Um, Probably the same level of goofiness as Shenmue, but a different type of game because it's survival horror. By the end of the game, I sort of wanted it to just end. I wanted to see where it was going and how it explained things. It didn't do that very well. It was very obscure and obtuse. The last boss was kind of interesting. It does play into the whole senses again. Not to spoil too much, but there is some like visual blindness stuff going on at the end of the game. There's some audio stuff that the sound goes away and goes in and out. So again, Kenji Eno was, I guess, playing on your senses of sight and sound. It was kind of interesting. By the time I got to the last boss, I was kind of spent. I sort of had enough, and I didn't have enough first aid. And I didn't want to keep running around and going back and getting first aid and coming back and grinding. So I took the easy way out and used a Game Shark, which in 2019 is just hysterical to talk about and hear, I'm sure. And I used the Game Shark just to get unlimited first aid spray, so I don't have to grind or level up anymore. There are levels. The more levels you get, the more health your character has. So I did that, played the last boss again, killed him, watched this really weird ending, which sort of made sense, sort of didn't. By the end of the game, it's pretty much telling you how many people were on Earth during, 1989 and then 1998, and then talks about people that are starving on the planet, people that are infected with AIDS. Then a clock comes up and starts spinning, and depending on what your internal Dreamcast clock is on, it will tell you how long until the 21st century. I think there's supposed to be some bigger, grander message of like people need to change and help each other and do more. That's sort of what I got out of this clock thing. Also, if you play it and it's past the 21st century, which we've been for a while now, because it's, like I said, 2019, it says welcome to the 21st century. So my clock was wrong because the battery in my Dreamcast is dead. So it was on 1998 still. So it said you have 700 or whatever thing it was on. It said you have so many days, I think 766 days to the new century. It's hard to explain. It's strange. It's worth going through just once if you're a fan of his games, if you're a fan of survival horror. However, it didn't age well. The graphics are pretty good, but old-fashioned, Resident Evil looking. The controls aren't that great. The sound is very good. The story is disjointed, strange, and hard to make sense. But it's sort of interesting nonetheless. It's an oddity that I would say if you're interested in and you find it maybe under 20 bucks, check it out. My game discs actually have scratches on them. I bought it off the internet years ago, and it's gotten up there kind of in price. But I think I spent like 20 or 25 bucks years ago, which was a good price back then, and even now is a pretty good price. It's complete without the manual, but I have the case and all the discs, but the discs are scratched. Some of the cutscenes froze up on me numerous times, so my game wouldn't continue. So I had to skip a couple cutscenes, which I was glad they gave you the option to by pushing B twice. Because if I wasn't able to do that, I wouldn't have been able to continue without, like, I guess, resurfacing the discs. I even tried a different Dreamcast, thinking maybe the lens was just having a hard time reading it, but it didn't really help. Overall, it's a unique oddity of a game that only certain people will appreciate, and I would say most people will not like and probably will not beat. Because by the end, I sort of had enough. And it's not a long game. It was maybe 8 to 10 hours, but it's just not great, and it didn't age super well. But it's interesting nonetheless. I mean, I'm not trying to knock it completely. I definitely think it's interesting. I think all of his games are interesting, but all of his games also didn't age very well. D didn't age well, even though it's interesting. Um, Enemy Zero, same thing. And with this one, I never played the Japanese one, Kaze No Regrets or whatever. But yeah, that's my 2 cents on the D series, including the other two, obviously D2. And let me know, guys, if you've played it or if you've played any of the games and what you thought of them. I think he was an interesting guy with some great ideas, but his games just didn't age well. So the wilderness in Canada was pretty cool. I mean, the game is completely like white. It's like barren. The whole game is just white snow and trees and some cabins, and it's pretty bare, like point A to point B, and then disc 2, point A to point B, disc 2, but sometimes you have to go do some backtracking, which was pretty annoying as well. So, but overall, it was okay. It was interesting enough. I don't think I'd ever play it again, but I'm glad to have tried it out. Thanks, guys, for watching. It's Vampire Mike from Sega CD Universe.